Firstly, thank you to everyone at Connected Inc. For letting me speak with you guys today. We've worked with Wacom for years. We have a great relationship with them as a company. And the people that work at Wacom have supported us doing a number of really amazing projects over the years. So it's always really lovely to come back and speak with Wacom's friends again. So thank you for having us. My name is Lee, Dr. Lee Bofkin. I'm one of the co-founders of Global Street Art. We're based in London. To give you a bit of a background to Global Street Art, we're an organization that exists with a mission to live in painted cities. Very simple mission. If you remember one thing from today, that's it. The mission is to live in painted cities. We have about 10 people working full-time to help fulfill that mission. It's an impossible mission. You never really have an endpoint, but it's something to keep striving for. And we achieve it in 3 ways. So firstly, Global Street Art has an online platform, globalstreetart.com, and the associated social media accounts. We have about 500,000 fans on social media, and that promotes street art and street artists online. The second thing that we do is we have we organize a lot of murals. Since 2012, we've organized over 2,500 legal street art murals across London. We have some programs that fit within that. One of them is called Art for Estates, which has organized over 100 murals in housing estates across London. We have another program called Building Sites, which is a pun. It works on building sites, and it's construction hoardings that go up around new buildings. We turn those into managed art spaces. And then most recently, what we'll talk about later as well, is London Mural Festival, which we organised for the first time this year, which went really well. I'll tell you more about that later. And the third side of what we do is we have an agency. globalstreetart.agency is where you find that online. We're the UK's leading provider of hand-painted advertising, which is very different from street art, but it's murals for brands, but we also do murals for developers and landlords. And then we make content, which goes out online. It's a project that we can show you. We will intersperse this with some clips, maybe. And so we'll show you some cool things that we've done with Wacom before. So that's content and licensing, and then interiors and other bits and pieces. But basically it provides commercial work for artists, keeps the lights on here, and that gives us the package that enables us to be able to fulfill our mission in lots of different ways.
Wicked.
We're going to do this in one take, by the way. If we haven't been clear about that, we've decided to try and... Matt is our... where's your official title?
Production associate.
Production associate. Just boss, really. Like, you do loads of different things. We had a podcast. Matt used to run it and is going to interview me by throwing out questions. And we would like to thank our sponsor for today, who is beer, anonymously. But if you see me drinking, that's what's going on. Well, I guess we've got to stand back and say, like, why did Global Street Art choose a mission to live in painted cities? Because it sounds good, but then you choose it, and we always wanted a really simple mission. The idea behind that is companies sometimes have 10-point missions or 5 things to remember, and it always felt like that was too difficult. There was too much to remember, and maybe those different parts of the mission didn't interact well, or they conflicted, and it was just complicated. We wanted to keep things simple so other people could remember it. So if if you come into the office and on the studio and you ask anyone what's the mission, everyone will know it's to live in painted cities. So it's easy to remember, and it felt right, but it has a meaning. So part of that is about community and the function of community and how our cities came to look how they did. Basically, our cities are largely not an accident, but they're layers of history built and rebuilt and knocked down and built up again over time. And they change over time as well. And we as individuals feel more connected to our cities if we've had a role in shaping what those cities look like. So the idea of painted cities is about having artists have more say in what our cities look like, and people feeling a sense of pride in their streets and sending the signal out that someone cares about how the city looks. But it's individuals and community that are doing that. It's not necessarily just a planning authority and one person's vision to say your city should look like this. And our cities, we as a species, evolved in environments that were natural and had lots of different colors, many shades of green and, grasses and savannas. And the gray, the overwhelming amount of gray that we have in our cities doesn't feel like it should be a necessity. And I think we as individuals are more stimulated by variations in color and more things to see, record, talk about, and interact with. And if a city looks, I wouldn't say inviting, but if there's more to look at, you might slow down. And the idea of living in painted cities also supports communities as well. So if you don't know your neighbors very well, but you're both slowing down and you're walking past a mural, you've instantly got something to talk about as well. So there is an idea that it helps start conversations and slow people down enough that facilitates and enables meetings and the functions that make a community good to help happen. So it supports that idea. That's why the mission is. So whenever I get asked a question, in the last few years, I write notes during the question, so I try not to forget what I actually want to say. So I've written 2 words down, and they're up and down. Street art has impacts on different communities. So for the artists that are painting, street art provides those people with a way of expressing themselves. It provides, but it can be so much more than that. It can help provide character to a neighborhood and offer a personality to an identity to a neighborhood and a space. It can help people's, it's almost like wayfinding and signposting. You might know where you are better just because there's more around that you can kind of remember and focus on. I mean, that's a really small reason, but again, like I said before, street art can show that a city is cared, that there is a community, a thriving community of artists who want to change how parts of the city look. And I think it is a powerful signal that says someone cares, or people care, multiple people care about how the space looks. And I think that's kind of important in itself. I think you can also talk about, street art doesn't have to be good to serve that function. Frankly, it doesn't have to be perceived as good to serve that function. So a lot of people will ask us what the difference is between street art and graffiti. It's an easy question to answer because you break it down and you say, well, actually, are you talking about the crime, the subculture, or the art form? And graffiti, a lot of people will see as the crime, and they'll see or understand as the tagging. That serves a really, it depends, and how you interpret that as a viewer is subject to change. And I think we were taught to fear graffiti and taught to kind of accept murals and street art. And I think there's an interesting conversation to have around appreciating those tensions that happen in public space between different groups of people that want to see different things in public space. What I'm getting to is I don't mind graffiti or tagging. In fact, I know so many people that do it. When I see a tag in a city, it depends where it is. If it's like on a church or a historic building, that doesn't work for me. But if I recognize who did it, it can make an unfamiliar city seem less menacing or less cold. And street art generally can do that, and it's more accessible than graffiti is for the general public, of course. And if you spend a day walking around a city looking at street art, you'll start to recognize some of the people, and you say, oh, I saw that person paint before. And I think that connection that you can get to a city and the streets via street art is really good. And it may be an excuse to travel and take photographs and something else to see as well. That's why I think street art's important in a roundabout way. I think I've been thinking quite a bit about this lately as well. So street art has a micro effect on the place that you see it. So if you walk down the street and you see a mural, it changes the way that space feels. If you have 20 murals in a neighborhood, that effect aggregates. So the impact that it has, one mural can have a big impact, but the more you have, the more an area is familiar for street art and it impacts the whole neighborhood. For better and for worse, it increases property prices. And that has it raises all sorts of questions and issues around housing policies and the interaction between street art and regeneration or gentrification and what that looks like. So there's interesting things to talk about there as well. The question again was the impact that street art has on the environment. So I think you've got that local impact, and then you've got that kind of bigger scale impact as well. It we shouldn't underestimate the impact that colour can have on a space. Something as simple as colour, but there's stories that are being represented. When you see murals of local people or rest in peace murals, there's a narrative that goes with that too, that people identify with. There's a lot of impacts and they impact people differently. Many of them are demonstrably positive, and the ones that are less positive, when I talk about kind of property pricing and things, you can break those issues down and think about, well, do we actually have adequate housing for people generally? So there's a lot of conversations to have around that. I think, we're in a really lucky, privileged position that we get to work with artists day in, day out, and that's amazing. It's really good to be around that creative community and be so involved in it. And it's not one community, it's lots of different people with different kind of hopes and aims. I don't think the impact has to be much for it to be worthwhile. I often think that, if you're traveling to work on a bus in the morning and you look out your window and you see a nice piece of art and it makes you smile, or, hey, that's cool. If it made your journey 0.5% better, that's more than worth it. It doesn't have to have a big impact, I'd say, to be worthwhile. And it probably doesn't. I think we've had letters from councillors where we've painted in housing estates where the councillor says, thank you for painting these murals, the amount of littering has been reduced. Because if there's some kind of signal that the murals say, I'm less likely to dump my trash here because now this space looks quite nice. So it can have an impact, but in the same time, some of the estates that we've worked with are pretty tough places, and it doesn't really have an impact on, as far as I can see or have heard, on like the drug dealing or some of the other like bigger issues that you can get in some of the estates around London and beyond. But it's a positive step. What do we do and how do we do it? We do lots of things, and I think the main thing to pick out to start is it's a we. So like I said, Global Street Art is around 10 people full-time. We went up to about 14 people full-time during London Mural Festival, but then we also have a brilliant team of freelance artists that we work with very frequently, and an extended team of artists that we work with less frequently. And the we is a really powerful combination of people who, when aligned for that mission or to make a specific project work, can achieve some really amazing things. We've painted 17,500 square meter floor murals for Zippo. We've done really small, we've helped organize really small stencils for our friends too. So what we do, the commercial and non-commercial side. The non-commercial side, we always had a view that when we started that we have a city that wants to be painted, or landlords who are open, developers who are open, people that own property who are open to having their walls painted, an artist that wanted to paint. And on the community side, what we sought to do was help that conversation in the middle to make that thing happen, just bridge the gap between those two groups of people. And for the sake of 10, 15 minutes of our conversation, maybe with a landlord, an artist then paint something over a few days or however long it takes, and the impact it might have on that street might last for years afterwards, for as long as the mural is still there. So on the non-commercial side of what we do, it's kind of bridging conversations and facilitating. And whereas before we used to just help artists get permission to paint places, now we can provide free paint and the tools and the materials that help an artist paint murals. And with London Mural Festival, providing the lifts, and there was paid work in there as well. Lots of different things on that side. On the commercial side, as I mentioned before, it's mostly hand-painted advertising. So a brand has the art, mostly they will guide the artwork. Sometimes we're involved with what that artwork looks like, either designing it creatively or making recommendations. Or suggesting artists, all sorts of ways that we can be involved. And then we'll take that artwork and we'll paint it quickly on a big wall that we look after. We have our own network of walls. And then, that's the business. That's the thing that we charge for. And then the leftover paint helps the community projects that we have as well. And we help a lot of artists make a living, not necessarily with their studio work, but by actually being out painting, when for them, that's closer to what they wanted to do than maybe work in an office like I do. So I guess what does it take to do whatever global street art is, you know, like I said, it takes the team, but that's a very easy way of answering. What does the team do, I think is one way to think about it. So we have a client service side that works with clients. We find spaces. And then we have a lot of operations and things that we have to book in, from the lifts, from preparing paint orders, all of those kind of things. There's a lot of logistics that sit behind what we do. And then Matt and Auberon produce digital content full time. So we record what we do as well, and that becomes part of the story. Then we have a communications function. So we obviously talk about our social media, and we have our voice and the things that we like to share. And that's what it takes to have this running as a unit. It helps that we're based in London, in Shoreditch, or Old Street, near to the traditional street art and hand-painted advertising centre of London, which is around here. It takes a van, it takes lots of ladders, it takes a workshop and a studio. It takes a lot of effort and time, and a few beers. The challenges are myriad. So, you know, some of the challenges that we face are just because painting very big walls is a very physical, challenging, difficult process. And sometimes lifts break down, sometimes you run out of paint. And whatever your planning is, no matter how hard you plan, something can go wrong. Some days the sun shines and some days it rains. So we have to deal with a lot of physical challenges. We're working in public space, so we're dealing a lot with lots of different kinds of people, from councils to clients, and everyone knows how difficult all sorts of groups of people can be, not just clients and councils, but you're working to keep a lot of people happy. So long as the artists that we work with are happy and the team is happy, and then the clients are happy, then I'm happy, really. So I think, the idea of being a middleman is a bit of a myth, I think, in creative industries. It's very rare that it does happen, I'm sure, but it's kind of rare that someone just connects someone to someone else, and then that's the sum total of their job. You have to have for us anyway, there's a lot of expertise and knowledge that's been built up over time for how to produce large-scale walls, and that planning as well. So those are some of the challenges. Years ago, a project that I mentioned, where we painted 17,500 square meters on the ground, we used 6.5 tons of recycled paint to do it. And how you get, recycled paint costs a fifth of the price of brand new paint. And when you're using 6.5 tons of paint, you want to save that money. So mixing colors, basically from leftover or thrown away paint, was a really unbelievable challenge. We ended up doing it in a bathtub with just giant mixers. So there's all sorts of crazy things that might creep in day after day and project after project. Every project is different, and the artwork is always different. We're working on a project now which uses a paint that kind of eats pollution or breaks down pollution. And it's a challenging material to work with because of how you have to mix it, how it's applied to the walls. And that's a brand new challenge that's come in from a project this week. One of our challenges, I think, over the last couple of years we've just been really, really busy. We've grown quickly, and everyone in a creative company knows what it's like to spin a lot of plates. And you can never hire quickly enough. It takes time to train people. So one of the challenges is just keeping up morale and energy levels for all of us, because we work really, really hard. London Mural Festival was a huge stretch for the team. And I guess we'll talk about that in a minute as well.
Well,
here's the question next. Alex at Wacom and your own reached out to us again, and thank you, because they'd seen, we speak regularly anyway, but had seen some things in particular online about London Mural Festival. And maybe it jogged a thought or a memory. And it was a new challenge for us. So Global Street Art has organised street art festivals in the past, in Sydenham, in Brockley, working with partners. but in specific neighbourhoods in London. And the idea of a London Mural Festival going all over London is really simple. It's an easy idea, it's an obvious name, it's an important idea to have, but the big challenge is to that, right, what does it look like and how do you make that happen? This year we had, I think, 76 different walls painted over 60 large spaces, worked with, I think it was 199 different artists. We had 10,000 cans of spray paint ordered, and we had, I forget how many lifts and how many hours were put in, but it was a huge undertaking and it went really well. We got to work with artists from 15 different countries. We had a focus on working mainly with UK artists. I think we worked in 13 London boroughs, different London boroughs. There's 30 boroughs in London, so it really was across the city. And it had to be across the city because of the way that London is built. There's a lot of billboard advertising and there's a lot of steel and glass. So it's not easy to get permission for spaces to paint at scale. So we had quite a long lead time to try and get permission for lots of big spaces. And then logistically, you need lots of council permits to close pavements, to park lifts, to spread the load of a 6.5 ton lift. You need trackways and spreader plates. And it was just a massive undertaking with a brilliant project management team to just, in a year of COVID, to just try and get this thing off the ground. It was mainly funded by us, but we had Zippo was our main brand partner who funded one wall, but also a really cool pop-up space. And then we worked with lots of different landlords like Lendlease and Quintain and EcoWorld who supported specific walls. So some of the walls had funding, most didn't. The money that we made from the walls that had funding helped pay for the walls that didn't. And then we invested our own time and resources to cover everything else as well. So a huge undertaking. It did really well. You can check it out at London Mural Fest on Instagram. And I think press did really well as well. It had about 1 billion reach in total aggregate press statistics, which was something that we didn't expect. And we think the reason for that is this has been a really tough year for everyone. So the prevailing narratives this year have been Black Lives Matter, so racial inequality, COVID, for us over here, Brexit, and climate change. And those are really difficult topics individually. To consume them all together makes this a really difficult news year and a kind of an anxiety-provoking year. And obviously freedom of movement with COVID is greatly curtailed. We weren't sure that we were going to be able to do this, but because we figured out ways of doing it within social distancing and what that looks like, it was a positive news story that has seen us on TV in Holland, in New Zealand, in obviously the UK, but Iran and Italy. And it's really surprised us how many people have connected with the idea of London Mural Festival as well. It's been amazing. So that's what it was. Big questions. So who and how? So for us, because we're such a community entrenched organization, we have our core team of people that work full time. We had lots of people who work with us, like a project management team would, of course, for the months that it happened, because it ran throughout the month of September and into the first half of October. Then the artists that we work with as well. So, you know, it's great that we were able to work in so many different ways with so many different friends. Curation was an interesting one. So we had some funding from the Hungarian Cultural Centre, the Czech Centre, although quarantines kind of ruined that after a while. From the Daiwa Foundation helped support, bring over 3 brilliant artists from Japan as well. Fate, Suiko, and I'm a One, who painted an amazing piece in South London. Ting! But the UK has so much homegrown talent as well that for the first London Mural Festival, we really had to make sure that UK-based artists and London-based artists were really well represented. And I think that was an important curatorial decision because we'd have been torn apart if we didn't. We've got a lot of friends who we wanted to see paint more big walls and friends closer, closer to London. So that was part of the decision. But we didn't curate it as much as facilitate it. There wasn't one overall theme for London Mural Festival. Because you have artists like Camille Walala and, let's say, Zabu or Rosie Woods or Mad C or Dale Grimshaw, who paint such different things, we didn't want to give a generic theme because it didn't feel like a theme probably could cover everyone. It didn't seem to make sense for the first year. We thought just doing the festival was enough. But when I mentioned some of the names of people involved, although I said we focused on artists from London or who were in the UK, a lot of those artists were born elsewhere, and that reflects the fact that London has got just a huge diversity of people. I think artists from about 15 countries or so were involved in the Mural Festival, which was awesome. So with any kind of big project like this, you have your core team, and then you have, we had a lot of ground staff as well, and people just making sure that the health and safety was there on day-to-day working around. So we had a lot of people, boots on the ground, essentially, making it work, and then the artists that we really felt like they were part of the team, but in a different way, because it was us. If you do a really good job at a cultural thing like a mural festival, you as organisers probably you try not to be noticed too much. People really notice things if something goes wrong. So we tried, with all the best planning, things do go wrong. We just tried to minimise the impact that had.
Wicked. Well, we're at 28 minutes.
Wow.
So,
God, I can talk a lot.
So yeah, I think, is there anything else?
Closing thoughts?
Yeah, closing thoughts, basically.
So Alex said, gave the title how to paint a city and not lose your mind. I think it's all right to lose your mind a little bit. I think you'll get it back. I think you want to stretch yourself. You're not born with any kind of concept of what you and the people around you are capable of. I think if we believe in one concept or principle, personally, that resonates a lot with me. It's Ubuntu, which is that it can be defined in a bunch of different ways, but the way I'll define it or choose to define it here is empowering yourself by empowering the people around you. And for us as an organization, that's really important. And if you are about to lose your mind, you just remember that you've got an amazing support network around you and the great privilege that it is to be able to work with a creative community. Thank you to everyone at Connected Inc. We hope that you've enjoyed what we've had to say. I'm Lee at Global Street Art, and our mission is to live in painted cities.